Hey everybody, thanks for joining us. The last several weeks we've been doing different practices with angels, and I thought tonight we'd open it up to questions and shares if you'd like. So we'll do the mystic vibration, we'll go through and do a practice, but for right now, anything goes. You can ask whatever questions, doesn't have to be with about what we've been doing these last few weeks. You can ask whatever you'd like. So go ahead and unmute yourself or type in and fire away.
And you can type in over to the chat, you can raise your hand, you can just unmute yourself. Like Greg said, anything goes. Someone's asking, how do we thank the angels after we receive blessings?
I think, like with our mind, we'd like to go through a process. And if that works for you, you could go through and offer up some gratitude. But the thing that would really kind of express the gratitude and the thanks is um, the activation of the heart. When we go through, we do our invocation, we were breaking it down where like invocation is really tied to the left side of our brain. And then when we use the angelic name, it's more um, as a mantra, it's more for the front part of our brain. And then when we slow down and we tone the name, it's to the right side of the brain. And then when we look at the materialization breath, it hits the back of the brain. And these four aspects get get refined over a period of time, but I'd say in the invocation, in that first part where we go through and we feel it in our body and we kind of are being conductive and practicing awareness on both the angel and ourselves. Um, that's kind of an invocation and a gratitude both at the same time. If you grew up doing something where you want to express it and that makes you feel better, but really the intention lying underneath the words is much more important than the words themselves. The a person can go through and say mechanically some of the words, but really the intention is not there. And then on the flip side, somebody might not come up with the words very, very well, or, they're not able to express themselves very well, but the intention and the devotion inside is very deep, even though they might not express it that way. And when you look at these two, that latter, the one where the intention is very strong and very sincere, and the devotional component is very deep, that does more than anything that we could do with words, like by far. And so, when we started doing the invocation at first, I don't know, about a month ago, we just did kind of a normal invocation. But you notice, like, as time went by, it's like we slowed down the invocation, we said the name of the angel repeatedly, and then we went to feel it in our body, right? We went to feel it in our body, and then when we feel something in our body, we would even repeat the angelic name. And this is the issue with the intellect is, for one, it's very repetitive in what it does. Sometimes that works for us, but in these situations it doesn't, right? And then it maintains that repetition. So it's always trying to maintain that thing that we do over and over again, right? And then there's a protective quality where it protects that repetition. And so the idea being that when you're invoking an angel and you're feeling it in your body, for one, you're invoking an energy with consciousness. The angel or the angelic name is a portal to a kind of energy with consciousness. And then you're holding it in the body, your awareness is on the body. You're basically overriding repetition, you're overriding the maintenance of that repetition, and you're overriding that protective quality. And when I say protective, it's not good protection. It's like kind of um, a resistance of sorts, resistance to the soul, or the resistance to just things that are spontaneous, or of the light or of the essence. And so by going through and making yourself conductive is the best expression of gratitude that you could have, you know, way more than words. But, like for myself, I grew up, doing those prayers. And so I still find myself going, thank you for your presence, thank you for your gratitude, expressing gratitude, thank you, so be it, things of that nature. And so you still want to do it with words, you could, but I would say feeling it in the body, you're shifting out of intellect and you're going into the intuitive state. You're opening yourself up to that angelic presence. And that is both an invocation and an expression of gratitude almost simultaneously. So, yeah.
Nice. Thank you. And then go ahead, Dan, and we do have one in chat as well.
Hey, Dan.
Hey, um, yeah, good question. Thanks for that one. Um, not sure how to put this out there, but I'm going to try because it's something I just kind of came across the other day. With expressing love in, twin hearts, right? So you start with love in the heart and then with the crown. Um, I went ahead and there was some other practice that we did the other day where just we had an expression of love. And in the heart chakra, like we started somewhere else and then we went to the heart. And it's amazing how the heart just totally expanded with just feeling the heart, feeling love within the heart. But I tried, we've been talking too about, back heart, navel, then crown. Right? And I was trying that with just, having a deep moment of love in each one of those chakras. It was, is that a good way to express like gratitude to the higher beings?
Sure, it's a different version of it, because like the idea being that I would say there's a couple of things there to unpack. So one, just the idea
Thanks.
of experiencing love. There's human love, and then eventually there starts to be like a kind of spiritual love, like associated with the crown. But I would say I take that even deeper and say, we experience a certain level of love when we're attached to the physical form. And eventually, that's the whole idea of intuition and clairvoyance and active clairvoyance, and is, you're going beyond the senses. You go beyond the senses, you go beyond your normal everyday perceptions, and really what starts to happen is you start to have these little flashes and things. But really what you're doing is you're little by little going past the form itself, and you begin to experience the astral body, the astral realm. And there, the level of activation of the heart, you can't touch it any other way. And so that idea of um, being able to touch that. It's almost like when we're doing a meditation with our awareness on the heart and crown, or back, heart, navel, and crown. You're prepping the body, you're nudging it in that direction, but it's almost like you're practicing for something bigger. You know what I mean? And the thing about, like, okay, feel it in your body, shift from being super focused into awareness. And even that pattern of the back, heart, navel, and then the crown, all of those shift your mind and your body out of like a stressed state. Because even when we go, well, I don't really have stress in my life, I don't really have stress going on in anything, we still, when we think from the point of view of intellect, it is literally stress thinking. Even if it's that you feel calm, it's still like, well, I want to know what's going to happen before I do it. And I want to know, you know, how to resolve this, and if this is going to be painful, or, when something different happens, you're like, all of a sudden you have an ache or pain in your body and you go, well, that's never happened before. All of that is just different ways of saying stress thinking. You're trying to manage or micromanage everything around you, right? And so, when you go through and you do these meditations, you're trying just to calm down the sympathetic nervous system and that kind of the stress thinking. The thing that I refer to it as sometimes as the mind of the hypotheticals. If this
Mm.
happens, what about this? What about that? Like, whoa,
Oh yeah.
if I go down that road, whoa, what's
Oh
going to
yeah.
happen there? Like,
Yeah.
that you trying to, like, we all do it. Like our mind is trying to manage everything to minimize pain, discomfort, whatever it is. And so when you look at that idea, there's like kind of a short-term answer and a long-term answer. You know, just connecting the heart and the crown, it's good. I mean, obviously, right? But the movement of the heart as it develops or activates, eventually the energy moves up to the brain, up to the brain and up to the crown. And it actually moves to a much greater degree from the back heart than it does to the front heart. And then the thing that's also very activating to the brain and the crown is actually the navel. And so, you know, there's a lot to unpack even with the idea of the navel.
Yeah.
In Kabbalistic practices, they refer to it as beauty. And then the Taoist practice, you know, they show like a baby's fetus in the navel.
Mhm.
And what that is symbolizing is the development of the soul. Like when you see
Wow.
like Lord Krishna is 7, or the Buddha was born at 8 years old,
Mm.
for the average person, we're a spiritual fetus. It doesn't mean we're a physical fetus there. It is that we're a spiritual fetus, and those stages of developing, the different ages, um, show like a symbol of development. And the navel is associated with your lower nature,
Mm.
right? So the navel regulates all the lower centers, and, you know, part of the drives of the primal aspects are really
Yeah.
held in the navel. So
Okay.
when you go back heart, navel, and then you move it up, you're kind of grabbing a little piece of your lower nature and you're going, you will spiritualize. You know
Okay.
what
Well,
I
that
mean?
sounds
You
like a
like
good thing
you
then.
you will go to the light even if you don't want to. You're going to the light. And it's a way to make the body more receptive and make the higher nature and the lower nature a lot more compatible. But it's also like a fuel for activating the upper centers. And so that idea of going from the back heart to the navel to the brain or the crown, you are increasing what you would call vagal tone. And vagal tone means simply is you're moving your mind out of a stress state into a state of just being. You know, you're able to go with the flow, you're able to problem solve, you're able to perceive, you're able to, you know, the intellect always sees things from the past, sees it through the filter of the past. And so a lot of times when we are looking at something, we're just looking through the eyes of what we recognize from the past. Where the intuitive mind, you're seeing potentials and you're seeing, new opportunities and things that might make you curious. And so when we practice body awareness, when we do the materialization breath, when we do Lama Yoga, all of these things are about improving or increasing vagal tone. And, at first, vagal tone helps us to feel better, helps us to feel calm, helps our body to heal, helps regulate our emotions, helps make our mind clearer. But as you continue to go deeper and deeper, part of going deeper with vagal tone is experiencing something beyond even the mind. And a lot of like what they would talk about in different religions, if like the path to enlightenment or how to be born again in Christ or whatever it might be. If you go, let's throw all that out, that's I don't know, that feels like nonsense to me. And you look at it from a science point of view, the science point of view would be the path would be vagal tone. Like, you're going vagal tone, vagal tone, vagal tone. Because even like, if you look at vagal tone with the heart, for example, um, vagal tone with the cardiovascular system, so if you have a stressed out cardiovascular system, you're going to have a physical heart issue, you're going to probably have high blood pressure, you're going to have circulatory issues, and you're going to have brain issues because the heart isn't getting enough blood and oxygen to the brain. You might also have respiratory issues because of the interaction between the heart and the lungs. But if you look at it deeper, and it's not just psychological, it's kind of like the state of the body. It's not just like, oh, this is how I think or these are the feelings. Is when vagal tone is not very good in the cardiovascular system, you have a very high potential for conflict, internal conflict and conflict in your environment.
Hmm.
And it doesn't necessarily mean always arguments, but you're just always at odds with everything. And if you think about the practice of, I'm trying to get this into my heart, there's the energetic version, there's the emotional version. But even as you go through and you go, okay, I'm practicing awareness on my body, the deeper version of that for the body is I'm getting a level of peace in my heart so that for one, it starts to resolve physical heart issues, but also that it starts to resolve conflict, either internal or external. And so the each of the systems in the body, like you have like an inflammatory response where even that has like a vagal tone component, which is basically vagal tone basically means rest and repair. And if that's off, the body tends to get inflamed, right? But if that's off also, it's easy to get emotionally and mentally inflamed. Like if somebody says something,
Right.
might agitate you a little bit. And, it's a big thing for people. Like when they're not getting their way, they say things with the intention to like hurt your feelings. And, if that area in the body is regulated, it's like, oh, look, trying to hurt my feelings. But if it's non-regulated, it's like, ugh, you really hurt my feelings.
Right.
You know, it like it did what they wanted it to do. And so, you know, that idea of the state of the body is still tied to a vagal tone. And so doing the heart and crown, still good. But when you do the back heart, the navel, and the brain or the crown after that, much stronger. Even like this tonka behind me, you can't really see it because it's small, but you know, he's got a hat on. There's a Buddha inside his heart, and then he's holding a bowl in front of his navel. It's heart, navel, crown.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
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 Kind of like what we did the
And
other night with the I think the other practice we were doing with the Kartika.
right.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Right. Yeah. One more thing too. It was
Mhm.
interesting when I brought to the my awareness with love to the navel. I mean, it was a it feels very joyous and free kind of thing with the heart kind of thing
Mhm.
as I kind of lean into it, if you will.
Mhm.
But with the navel, it was like I almost felt like crying, like the tears. It just was an emotional crying kind of thing, but in a kind of happy way. It was kind of just
Yeah.
very, very. But it was different, very different, and just kind of sad, but happy, kind of getting through something or getting beyond something. Yeah, it was just a
I would say that
wonderful.
that is the power or the process of realization. You know, if you really think about like you're sitting there in your meditation and you're like home, then you're sitting there and you're contemplating something, and then boom, something hits you, and you're like, oh, I have this deep realization. And what happens is there's also a little tear in the eye,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
and you know even the thing about us breaking out of the repetition, we grieve it sometimes because
mm,
we knew it so well and we did it so long, and to a certain extent it was like kind of a part of us. It was, but it wasn't, but we kind of identified it. You know, it's like if, you know, this is like a weird thing, but like if you had a nail and a magnet, you know, the nail is being sucked into the magnet, and it's kind of like how gravity is to us. Gravity, because it impacts the body, it also can impact, you know, the inner world and can impact the soul for a certain extent. And at some point that nail and that magnet stuck together, you could say the nail kind of forgets that it was never attached to the magnet, you know.
mm,
And it's a lot like us with our essence coming into a body.
really.
And we have a lot of information coming from the body. And when we start to step away from it, you know, it is almost, even though it can be joyous, it also can be a little bit sad because we did identify with it and we did do it for a long time, and we, you know, maybe we're attached to it or we were just always aware of it. And you know, to a certain extent, you know, sometimes those repetitive things, you know, as weird as it sounds, almost was like a friend to us, and you're
Yeah, I could
kind of stepping away and breaking up with your friend
I
and
get
moving
it.
away from it. But
Yeah,
it's, you know, sometimes it's all you knew.
yeah. I
And
mean,
so realization can be joyous and sad at the same time, you know.
right,
Yeah.
right. Yeah, thanks.
So
And then go ahead, Romana.
hey, Ramona.
I was wondering, um, when you're talking about the angels,
Mhm.
when I used to walk into a place and I didn't feel very good about it, I
Mhm.
used to always ask Saint Michael to come
Sure.
and clear it up, and he would.
Mhm.
I don't know why, but he always did, and but I felt like there was,
Like a presence
uh,
of sorts.
yeah, but it was lifted from me, or the person that made me uncomfortable would leave.
Mhm.
It really interesting
Mhm.
situation. But and then after that, like, and then the other thing I wanted to talk to you, when you start getting close to talking to your higher self,
Mhm.
to the higher one, and you start talking to them interiorly, I've noticed that you start looking at people not as man or woman, or whatever, but as souls,
Sure. Yeah.
because you're looking at them as a soul, not as a gender. Let's put it this
Right.
way.
Yeah.
And you love them as a soul. You don't. So it's a beautiful love. It's
Yeah.
but it's hard to explain to somebody that doesn't believe in this.
Yeah.
You know. So yes, I the thing is
It's like
to
trying to
continue this.
explain how to cook to somebody that's never been in a kitchen.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's beautiful. But the only thing I can say, we have to continue meditation
Yeah.
every single day.
Yeah.
Every day, if we can, just talk to them. I've
Right.
I've made it into, like, every night before I go to sleep, I
Oh,
talk to
beautiful
my
practice.
I do that. I'm thankful for the things that I'm getting, and the ones
Hmm.
that I'm not. I say, well, you know why you're not granting me these things, but oh well, it must be a reason.
Yeah.
Maybe in time I'll find out. But I want to thank you and your crew,
Oh, thank you.
Reverend Anthony, and I thank every day Peggy, and I know she's up in heaven.
Yeah.
Um, but for all what you're doing, and
Oh,
hopefully I'm able to show other people
yeah,
what
that would
that
be
they
great.
should be close to all of you. That they should open it up, go into the internet, open it up, look at it, read it, you know,
Yeah.
and
Well, thank
and
you.
they do the lessons too. I
Yeah.
love you guys.
Love you
Please
too.
don't stop. Don't
You're
stop.
so sweet.
Because you're my, I'm not no longer going to the Catholic Church, you're my church.
You're so sweet. Thank you. So we're going to jump over to the mystic vibration
Alrighty.
and we're going to jump into doing a practice. And since we were talking about the back heart, navel, and crown, we're going to do a version of that. So go ahead and join us if you can.